Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. Mike Hilgers, Nebraska Attorney General. Before we start, just a housekeeping, as we normally do. There is a number. We have some people live streaming. We also have people listening in. If you want to ask questions at the end, we do have the number that was on our media advisory. Please send Suzanne a text, and we'll cover those questions at the end. Thanks to everyone for being here today. We're having this press conference to announce just a short time ago, the state of Nebraska filed a lawsuit in Douglas County District Court against OPPD. The purpose of the lawsuit is to ensure that OPPD does not shut down critical generation units at its North Omaha facility. Shutting down those units today undermine the two goals that the legislature has given public power in Nebraska, which is affordability and reliability. So that's what we've done. Let me give you a little bit of background, a little bit of why, and then a little bit of what, and then we'll take questions. So big picture background. Energy is one of the most important resources that we have. People, water, energy is probably in that order. Energy is very important to lower costs for families. It's very important for businesses, for business growth. Reliable sources of energy is really critical to our quality of life. And in this world where we have a dramatic increase of energy demands, from the electrification of our vehicle fleets to the significant demand on AI, which by the way is a separate national security issue, winning the AI race against China, and more energy on the grid is one of the most critical issues around the country. There isn't a place in the country that is actually trying to take generation capacity off. And if they are, some places have been, like DC or California or New Jersey, and in each of those particular places, the energy has either increased in cost, decreased in reliability, potential for brownouts, or most likely both. So in Nebraska, we've been blessed with low energy costs, in part because we use coal as one of our baseload generating fuels. We use natural gas, also because of our public power. As you all know, public power in Nebraska is unique. It's the only state in the country with public power statutes. That is one of the reasons we've been able to keep costs low in the state of Nebraska. It's worked very well. The legislature has essentially said to public power entities in the state, you can operate, but you have two goals. The two most important things are reliability of the grid, reliability of your energy source, which means access to sufficient levels of dispatchable power. That means you can turn it on at a moment's notice. You can get it when you have peak demand on your grid. And the second is affordability. You have to do things that keep the power in Nebraska affordable. Those are the two goals. By the way, affordability largely is also driven by the same sources that help with reliability, which are coal and natural gas. Those are the rules of the road. OPPD has determined that it is going to they have 5 generation units at their North Omaha plant. 3 of them run on natural gas, 2 of them run on coal, and what they've determined is that they are going to actually reduce by about 40% their generation capacity at North Omaha. The way they're going to do it is they're going to take all 3 of their natural gas units offline, 1, 2, and 3, and their 2 coal units, which are 4 and 5, they're going to transition to natural gas. The reason they're doing that, by their own words that we found, is not because of reliability, and it is not because of affordability. In fact, doing these things almost certainly will worsen both of those two things. There's almost no doubt that this action will increase costs and decrease reliability in Omaha. The reason that they've stated are really 2. The first is an environmental justice concern. This is what they've stated on their site and in their public documents. They set about 6 years ago a net zero goal to try to reduce or eliminate carbon emissions by 2050. That is an idea that has been discarded in most places around the country because of both the significant impacts on the quality of life and standard of living on regular everyday people, but also the incredibly urgent need for power when it comes to AI. Whether you think that is a good idea or not a good idea, it is not one of the 2 statutory requirements and dictates from the Nebraska legislature. Affordability and reliability is not environmental justice. So that's the reason number 1. The second reason is some suggestion that actually the North Omaha power plant impairs the air quality in Omaha or in North Omaha. And I just want to be very clear. That is not true. That is not true. If you look at, or what I should say is, if you look at the air quality standards in Omaha, as of 10:30 this morning, if you look at the air quality standards, which we did, we checked, Douglas County, they have an online portal where you can get the air quality standards. We are in the great zone. Under 50, under this metric, is great. As of this morning, we were at 29. OPPD itself has said that the North Omaha Power Plant has been given a low emitter status. The federal government has very stringent regulations when it comes to particulate matter and emissions, and the North Omaha plant falls within those guidelines. If the OPPD wants to continue to reduce emissions at that plant, which they have in the past, they absolutely can, and frankly, as a policymaker, I would encourage them to do so. But they cannot do it if they are degrading the affordability and the reliability of the grid. And by shutting down 40% of their capacity, that's exactly what they're doing. The Omaha area is under, like everywhere else in the country, has significant demands for its resources. OPPD, according to their public comments, anticipates that they will have another 2,000 megawatts of demand over the next 10 years. Taking 40% of their North Omaha facility offline will reduce their capacity by over 200 megawatts. This is a short-sighted policy that will only increase the cost on Nebraskans, reduce the reliability of the grid to people in Omaha, and ultimately, because it violates the state statutes and the public policy the state of Nebraska has laid out by the Nebraska legislature, we think it's unlawful, and that is why we have sued, asked for a court to enjoin that particular action. With that, I am happy to answer any questions. Zach?
So you said taking the 3 off would take off 200 megawatts of power?
Over 200. So the question from Zach is, taking the 3 generation units offline would take 200, yes, it would be about 200, 230 maybe megawatts, plus or minus. It's over 200.
What about the replacement that this retirement is contingent upon the completion interconnection on Turtle Creek Station, 450 megawatts, and Standing Bear Lake Station, 150 megawatts, in the document cited in your lawsuit?
Yeah, so those are OPPD answers to Senator Tom Brandt. There's no doubt that there has been some of that is online today. Even with that online, all of it online, which it's not, Zach, but even with all of it, and some of it is, there's no way that is a status quo move that only helps keep some status quo. It is not enough to handle the future growth of the grid. You have 2,000 megawatt demand coming over the next 10 years. Even with that online, it's still not enough. You don't want to take anything offline. It's not as if that gives a bunch of extra capacity to OPPD that you can then sort of play around with some additional capacity. It's not the case. It's basically just helping you tread water with what you have currently. Does that make sense?
What about the argument?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is local control. Community leaders in North Omaha have been pushing to get the coal-fired power plants offline for the air quality. You dismissed that as a concern, but they have been pushing.
No, I didn't. I want to be very clear. I did not dismiss it as a concern. You can have a concern about air quality. I have 4 little kids. I have a concern about air quality. Let's be clear, John. I'm not saying that people cannot be concerned about air quality. What I'm saying is the air quality, according to the federal government, and the air quality metrics and indices by which these things are measured say that the air quality is good. So I'm not dismissing any concern.
It's not actually, in reality, a
Right.
concern. But they've pushed for that, and OPPD, is doing that in part because of that, but in part because of their green strategies and other things they're bringing online. So, here you are as kind of over the state, setting policy in some ways for what they can do.
Great question, but let's be really clear. I'm not setting policy for anything, and I'm not saying local control doesn't matter. The Nebraska legislature, about 90 years ago, John, said that this is the state policy. And the Nebraska legislature, people of Nebraska, through their elected representatives, said the 2 most important things are reliability and affordability. Now, if you can keep your energy reliable and you can keep it affordable, and you want to reduce emissions, great. If you want to reduce your particulate matter, that's also great. What you cannot do, and that's up to the elected board. They are welcome to do that, and I certainly am not going to micromanage those kinds of decisions. But when you are elevating those issues over affordability or over reliability, and you are making decisions to take generation capacity offline in ways that certainly will increase costs, in ways that will absolutely undermine reliability, that is a violation. That is directly contradictory to the policy as set out by the Nebraska legislature. And for that reason, and really only that reason, is why we're involved. Yeah, Andrew.
Do you think it's the role of the Attorney General to, try and supersede the actions of an elected board? I mean, I haven't seen you file any lawsuits against, county boards who reject clean energy projects that would increase energy.
So Andrew's question is, the role of the AG to sort of supersede elected boards? It is the role of the Attorney General, Andrew, to enforce the public policy of the state of Nebraska. what OPPD is doing in this specific instance is undermining, directly contradicting the two goals that has been given by the Nebraska legislature. If county boards have made decisions on zoning to reject or not, those are within their purview. I've not seen one example, and if you have one, I'm happy to consider it either live or afterwards. If there's an instance where a county board or another political subdivision has made a decision that directly contradicts the explicit mandates given to it by state statute, yeah, we would absolutely look at that. But I don't think the examples you're giving of, county boards making decisions, zoning decisions, using their lawful authority on zoning fall into that category. But there might be something specific you're thinking of, and if we've missed something, we'll always look at it. Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
Why now? I mean, this decision from the LPPD board was in 2022, right? They delayed that decision a few times. I mean, can you just explain why this lawsuit?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Zach has asked, why do we do it now? You're right, they have delayed it, but I think the delays are at an end. And the sense that we're getting is that the delays are over and this is coming. And it takes a lot of work. You can't just switch these things off. You remember when Cooper was shut down in Fort Calhoun, the nuclear station. It takes some time to do. And I think that the board has got to start acting to be able to put into place the decommissioning of those units. So that's why now. I think once you go down that road, it's a lot harder to unwind it. So that's why now. Now, if they are going to come back to us and say, oh gosh, you misunderstood all the things we've been saying publicly, we actually are going to delay it by 3 or 4 years, and I think that would impact our lawsuit. But the why now is we have this very narrow, limited amount of time where if we don't act, I think it will start to get out of the barn, if that makes sense. Yeah, Andrew.
Have they indicated that this is going to lead to rate increases, or I mean, part of your argument is that this is going to affect affordability, but is that just a prediction?
So the question from Andrew is it going to impact affordability? I think they've made public statements that suggest that taking this offline will impact affordability. I don't think anyone could possibly argue that it wouldn't. So let me give you an example. $15 million of additional costs, I think, results in 1%. This is according to their public documents, and allows for a 1% rate increase. This is just for additional costs. This North Omaha, their projected cost of the North Omaha decommissioning is going to cost $400 million plus over maybe 15 years. So you're talking about just the cost savings itself. But all of our lived experience tells us, it's California's lived experience, Washington, D.C.'s lived experience. And Washington, D.C. brought out some of their dispatchable power, some of their coal generation units offline. Their electricity prices went up 9%. So ultimately, it is a supply and demand issue. There is absolutely no reason to think, and it would defy reality and economics to suggest that taking 200 plus megawatts offline, given this demand environment we're in, will do anything other than increase the cost to ratepayers. Do you have a question, or am I just imagining that? Sorry, John.
But do you have, hard evidence about the decrease in affordability and reliability over time? As Zach pointed out, they've got plans to bring on other, power into the grid. And you even said it's a status quo move. If they're keeping the status quo the same in terms of megawattage, what is the evidence that this actually would, in the moment, decrease affordability?
Yeah, so it's a fair question. So John was referring to the status quo discussion. I want to be clear what I meant by the status quo. Bringing that additional capacity online does not, it is essentially allows them to meet in the very near term the additional demand. So if they do nothing else and just bring on what they've been brought online, Turtle Creek Station, as Zach mentioned, the other Standing Bear Lake is another one. If they just bring that on, that will enable them to meet current demand, which would enable them to not have to increase prices, theoretically. That's if they don't do anything with North Omaha. So in other words, this new capacity they brought on, John, isn't some additional buffer. It's not as if they're like, well, we got 500 new megawatts of capacity that is just sort of sitting out there for future emergencies or future use, and now we can pull 227 out of that. That just allows them to that enables them to meet the status quo demand of today, assuming North Omaha is online. If North Omaha is not online, then they can't, even with that new capacity, given the demand growth. Does that make sense? Yeah, Zach.
Your lawsuit also includes, in that response to Senator Brandt, plans to build what looks like 5 Turtle Creek 3, Cass County 3, 4, and 5, and Pierce County Energy Center in 2027 and 2029. with more than 1,000 megawatts, as you mentioned. I mean, how are they not, can you just explain, how are they not planning for the future?
Well, so Zach's question is there's gonna be additional online capacity and how they're not planning for Zach, there's a world of difference between planning for the future with projects that could be online in 4 years. By the way, I'll give you $1 if you can find projects where they project the completion date and they hit the completion date. Assuming if I give you $1, that's ethical, probably not. So imaginary $1. So first, dollars to donuts, that something in 4 years from now is actually not gonna be in 4 years. But that, so it might be 5, 6, 7 years, but even assume for a minute that's true. That is not gonna be online today. That's not gonna be online today. So you're taking off energy from the grid today. You have an enormous amount of increased demand today. There's gonna be more demand tomorrow. By the time you get up to 27 or 29 with population growth, even if you added that would still keep you below where you need to be. So I think it's just not realistic I think if they wanted to do it in a way that would be consistent with the 2 dictates that this legislature has given them, it's to build that first and then decommission afterwards or sort of contemporaneously with. But that's not what they're doing. They're taking this offline and then saying, eventually we're gonna have this other energy online. We have one on, speaking of online, we have a question.
Marjorie Beck from AP. Did the AG's office try to negotiate a solution with OPPD before filing the suit?
The question for Marjorie is, did we try to negotiate a solution? The answer to that question is no. I did call OPPD before this press conference to give them a courtesy heads up. My hope is actually that they would come to the table. I think that would be a better use of taxpayer dollars. We're open to a negotiated resolution for this particular issue, whether it's a delay or something else that they might have in mind. So no, we did not, but that's often the case. We don't always negotiate before we file suit. Sometimes it makes sense, oftentimes it doesn't, but we always have our door open. I should say almost always have our door open after we file suit for negotiations. Yeah, Andrew.
Would it have been a better use of taxpayer dollars to call them before you drafted a lawsuit and filed it?
Would it have been a better use? If there's anything in the recent history to suggest that they would have changed course, I mean, it seemed pretty locked in. We didn't really have a lot of time for a negotiated resolution. At the end of the day, though, Andrew, I mean, within the time period that we had, but I'll tell you, at the end of the day, we've got great lawyers on our team. There's no incremental additional tax resources used for our part in it. Now, and there won't be for them either if they come to the table and resolve it. If they want to fight it, then yeah, unfortunately, there would be more probably costs for the Omaha taxpayers. But ultimately, we think this will be successful. And if we are successful, then we think it will save, as I mentioned, upwards of $400 million, which is what they have said they think that it will cost to decommission these. Suzanne, you got another one?
Marjorie has a follow-up. Would the Attorney General's office be willing to negotiate a settlement such as accepting a full conversion of the plant to natural gas?
Marjorie's asking various negotiating positions, and I had a joke in there, but it wouldn't have been funny. We're open to settlement. I'm open to settlement. I'd rather resolve it through settlement if we can. I think I'm open-minded at what that would look like. The key is, can they have a reliable source of power with dispatchable baseload that comes from 2 sources, coal and natural gas, nothing else? And will they keep affordability for Nebraska taxpayers and taxpayers in Omaha? If those 2 things are satisfied, which theoretically, without having dug into all the details, keeping all 5 units on natural gas likely would, we absolutely would be open to that. You have a question?
So if they're meeting the status quo for energy and they're not planning on raising prices or rates anytime soon, why are you suing now if this hasn't happened yet? Why sue for something that happened?
Yeah, so let me take a third. So I'm not being precise enough on the status quo point. If they don't do anything with North Omaha, with the new generation, you will have status quo. If they do what they say they're gonna do, which is take North Omaha offline, they will not have status quo. This is all from Zach's question earlier. Well, hey, Mike, they're putting on this extra capacity, doesn't that sort of net out? And the answer is no, because that extra capacity is just helping them keep the status quo. If they didn't have that extra capacity, they likely would be facing more rate increases today if they kept North Omaha. So if you add more capacity, and all that does is keep you at your price point today, and then you take North Omaha offline, you will increase prices. Does that make, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, because the words reliability and affordability seem to be key in this case.
Mm-hmm.
What is reliable and what is affordable in this case?
That's a great question. The question is, what's reliable, what's affordable? By the way, those are not I mean, I think as a policy perspective, those are really important. You know, someone who relies on consistent access to energy, I think that's important. But these are not my policy goals. This is the Nebraska legislature's policy goals. I think reliability is a pretty well-worn standard. Do you have enough baseload capacity, dispatchable baseload capacity? That means you can just turn it on with the flip of a switch, more or less, to be able to handle the peak demands on your grid. That's reliable. The way you do get to reliability is you have enough power generation to be able to handle all of sort of the megawatt needs of your particular community, but you also, it has to be dispatchable power. It's got to be able to be the type of power that you can turn on. In 5 or 6 or 7 years, maybe battery power will be robust, batteries will be robust enough where solar could also be dispatchable. The problem with renewables is they could be good sources of energy, but they're not dispatchable. And so I think that would be reliability. Affordability, somewhat in the eye of the beholder, I think, but the reality is what we've seen in other places that, like DC, I think I mentioned this stat before, when they took coal generation offline, their prices jumped 10%. And I think I don't have an exact projection for what it would be, but given the demand and the needs, I think increases around there impact affordability. So I don't have like a precise quantitative framework to give you on affordability, but I'll tell you the types of increase that we would expect would undermine the affordability target of the statute.
Okay.
Yeah, Suzanne, and then John.
Sarah McKenna from News Channel Nebraska. How does this affect others outside of North Omaha?
Well, the question is, how does it affect others outside of North Omaha? It affects everyone in OPPD's service area, which is just under 1 million households. Because North Omaha doesn't just power North Omaha, it goes into the full grid and it powers the entire district. So this will impact the reliability and the affordability of energy for everyone in the greater metro area, which is not just everyone in Douglas County, it's other counties as well. Yeah, John?
Do you think OPPD's goal to be net zero carbon production by 2050 is at odds with the legislature's public power goal of sustainable and, sustainable and affordable?
Yeah, it's a good. So John's question is, do I think the net zero by 2050 is at odds with the affordability and reliability? It depends on how they try to get there. I would say, given our current technologies, John, having that. Well, let me say this: having an aspirational goal 25 years out from today, I don't think on its own says that power today is going to be unaffordable and not reliable. So I can't say generally speaking, but I can say with what we know about the technology that exists today, modular nuclear is still several years away, probably several years away from being, even beyond that, from being affordable for us to be able to use at a widespread scale basis. Given what we know about our energy capabilities today, I think it's probably not likely, but I'm not filing this lawsuit because they announced net zero. I want to be really clear. That's the justification they gave, but that's not why. The reason I'm filing the lawsuit is not because of what they might theoretically do in 2040, 2045, or 2049. It's because what they are going to do today, which is to take over 200 megawatts of power offline in a time in which there's incredible amount of increasing demand, and they're barely treading water as is. That is the complaint. So I would say, if you look at the data and the technology, it is probably at odds, but I want to be clear, that is not, 2050 on its own is not why we're suing. Yeah, Zach, the
One
name.
follow-up on John's question on the health side. What do you say personally, regardless of what the data says, but what would you personally say to the residents of North Omaha who feel that they are facing unhealthy concerns, or who feel that their concerns aren't being heard?
Well, Zach, I think by assuming your question that I can't consider the data, it sort of makes the argument a little,
You had mentioned that the data shows there are health concerns.
Right.
So I'm going off of that.
No, right. I guess, but what I would tell people is I would say a couple of things. Number one, I think the data, I don't know if people are I've not seen a piece of data that has been not otherwise contradicted by sources of information from the federal government or Douglas County that suggests that it's unhealthy. So that's the that's the very first thing that I would say. The second thing I would say is, if you think there are emissions concerns, go to OPPD and work with them to help address those types of concerns. There are things they have done and probably things that they could do. All I'm saying is, I'm not saying don't try to address it. What I'm saying is, don't try to address it by shutting out over 200 megawatts and 40% of your capacity. I'm just saying don't do that. If there's other ways, if maybe switching it from coal to natural gas for all 5 generation units would help in that regard. I know natural gas does run cleaner than coal. Maybe that's something that they could do. Maybe there's some additional work that they can work on that, and I'd encourage them to work on that, and I'd encourage OPPD to work on that. I don't think the concern today is borne out by the data, but people disagree with me. There are plenty of avenues to take that don't include shutting down an enormous amount of power at a time when we shouldn't be shutting down we should not be taking one electron off the grid today. Did you have a question, Andrew? Sorry.
Do you plan to seek a second term as Attorney General?
Yes, the question is, am I planning on seeking, yes, I'm seeking re-election, yes. I was not expecting that one,
Nah,
Andrew.
I didn't think so.
You always got a curveball for me.
Try to.
Any other questions online, Suzanne? And I'll come to you, Zach.
I just want to ask you separately from your office's previous statements on
Yeah.
legal cannabis. Can you just clarify where your office stands today now that licenses have been issued?
Mm-hmm.
And in a separate appeal this week, you mentioned maybe patient protection could be potentially as a hypothetical way to challenge the law. I just want to clarify where your office stands today.
What was the second thing you said in an appeal this week? What did I?
In a brief, and a filed an appeal before the Supreme Court, you had mentioned that the state could even use, if they charge someone for illegal possession of medical cannabis, that they could challenge the Patient Protection Act. That was in a brief from your office filed on Monday.
Okay, I have no comment on this, what the Medical Cannabis Commission is doing or our action in response to any particular license decision.
Sarah McKinnon from News Channel Nebraska, would you drop the lawsuit if it comes out that the shutdown of the power would not have any effect on the residents of Omaha?
Oh, so the question is, would I shut down the lawsuit, would I withdraw the lawsuit if it came out that taking off this power would not have an impact on, I mean, if that were to be true, we wouldn't file a lawsuit, But that is, so I appreciate the question, and we're intellectually honest around here, and so if the facts aren't there, we don't file lawsuits just to gain headlines, we file lawsuits because there's a real reason and we intend to win. But if it doesn't have an impact and the data shows that out, I'd be the first one to withdraw it. For the reasons I was articulating to Andrew and Zach earlier, though, I don't think there's a world in which that could possibly be true today. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. You got me on that.